It's 2:47 a.m. You're lying in bed, phone screen burning blue into your eyes. You've scrolled through reels, shorts, stories looped, dopamine hits dressed up as meaning, and yet a heavy hollowness hangs in the silence between swipes. There's something you're supposed to be doing, something just out of reach, a deeper pull that whispers, "You're wasting your life." But you don't move. You stare, you sigh, you feel the guilt, but not the will. The dream version of you, the one that writes the book, builds the body, finds the purpose, feels like a ghost you admire from a distance. You want to be that person. You think you want to be that person. So, why haven't you moved in weeks? They'll tell you you're lazy and motivated, weak, maybe even broken, that you need to hustle harder, read more productivity hacks, follow a 10x morning routine, install 5 different habit tracking apps, and rise at 5 a.m. like the digital monks of Instagram preach. But what if they're wrong? What if this paralysis isn't laziness, but grief? What if your so-called lack of discipline is the natural response of a soul that has no idea where it's going anymore? And what if that soul, your soul, has simply gone silent, not because it gave up, but because it's been drowned out? You live in a world that glorifies speed and punishes stillness. It sells you dopamine but starves you of direction. It promises that happiness lies in more content, more ambition, more validation, more stimulation. But what happens when all that more leaves you feeling less alive, less certain, less you? That question matters, because right now your body may be stuck to the couch, your mind may be lost in noise, and your motivation may have flatlined, but underneath all that, something deeper is still awake, watching, waiting, wondering if this is all there is. You tell yourself you want to change. You want to wake up early, hit the gym, eat clean, chase your dreams, rewrite your story. You say you want transformation, but you keep waking up tired, numb, emotionally bankrupt. Not because you're too lazy to evolve, but because evolution demands clarity, and clarity is what the noise has stolen from you. So here's the real question. What if your biggest problem isn't a lack of discipline, but a lack of direction? Not knowing who you are, not knowing where you're going, not knowing why you should even try. Because without a why, discipline dies. Without a vision, effort feels like punishment. And without a meaningful destination, the journey becomes unbearable. You're not lazy, you're lost. And before you can run towards something better, you need to admit something terrifying. You don't know where you're going. Maybe you never did. Maybe you were just following the script, ticking boxes, absorbing expectations that never truly belonged to you. And now that the illusion has collapsed, you're left with the silence behind the noise. That aching gap between who you are and who you were supposed to be. The mirror that doesn't lie. But in that silence, there is a door. And on the other side of that door is the truth behind your lostness. Let's open it. Let's return to that silence. The part of you that feels lazy isn't resisting work, it's resisting a meaningless direction. It's not that you don't want to act. It's that your soul refuses to participate in a life that feels empty. What you've labeled as procrastination may actually be protest, not the sloth of a disinterested mind, but the rebellion of a fragmented self. To understand this, you have to go deeper into the psychological, into the philosophical, into the parts of you society doesn't teach you to explore. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. You've likely been taught to optimize your time, manage your schedule, suppress your doubts, but not to meet yourself in the mirror of solitude. And it's in that mirror where you realize you're not unwilling, you're unaligned. Nietzsche spoke of the death of God, not as a literal deity falling from the heavens, but as the collapse of shared meaning. And what replaced it? Nihilism, the belief that nothing matters, that we are wanderers on a meaningless rock, trying to inject purpose into a purposeless cosmos. In that kind of world, why should you wake up with fire in your bones? Because deep down you feel this, not in a philosophical text, but in your bones, that something has been lost, a center, a compass, a sense of why. You scroll past countless success stories, self-help gurus, and influencers screaming that you should be chasing your dreams. But they never stop to ask, what if the dream isn't even yours? Arthur Schopenhauer believed that the human will is endlessly hungry, that we chase pleasure not because it satisfies, but because the alternative facing our internal void is unbearable. In today's world, that void is filled with noise, TikToks, memes, instant likes, fast food, fast fashion, fast identity. Your spoon-fed identities to wear and roles to play, but none of them stick, because none of them speak to who you really are. So, what happens? You go numb. And in that numbness, you start to assume the worst, that maybe you're just lazy, maybe you're broken, maybe everyone else got the secret manual to life, and you just missed the memo. But you're not broken, you're disoriented, disconnected, not from the world but from yourself. Think of it like this. Imagine a traveler lost in the desert. They stop walking not because they're lazy, but because every direction seems equally meaningless. That's you, standing in the sandstorm of modern life, surrounded by signs pointing everywhere and nowhere all at once. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that freedom is terrifying, that once you realize you can choose your path, you're also burdened with responsibility for that choice, and many people would rather follow than confront that weight. That's why conformity is comfortable. That's why the path laid out by society, school, job, mortgage, retirement feels safe even if it doesn't feel right. But when that path crumbles, when you sense its hollowness, you freeze. You're told to just take action. But how do you act without meaning? How do you pour effort into a vision that isn't rooted in truth? This is the crisis at the core of modern humanity. A crisis not of energy, but of essence. We've built a world that incentivizes productivity over presence, distraction over depth, performance over purpose. You've been conditioned to measure your worth by metrics, followers, income, output, not by your alignment with your soul. And that soul, it's not lazy, it's starving. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the Holocaust, once wrote that when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. And isn't that exactly what we do? We binge, we scroll, we escape, not because we're indulgent, but because we are disoriented. We hunger for purpose, and when we can't find it, we numb the hunger. So, what's the hidden problem? It's that you've been taught to chase productivity before discovering purpose. You've been asked to function in a world that never paused to ask who you are. And because of that, the engine of your life won't start. Not because the machine is broken, but because it was never built to run on someone else's dream. And here's the most haunting part. Most people will spend their entire lives mistaking this disorientation for laziness. They will try harder, hustle more, burn out faster, only to realize at the end that they climbed the wrong mountain. But not you, because something inside you is awake now. Not fully, not loudly, but enough to question, enough to feel that maybe, just maybe, this lostness is your soul trying to reroute you home. And that begs the next question. What happens when this hidden confusion starts shaping your entire life? What does it cost you to stay lost, and how deep do the consequences go? Let's go deeper. You wake up with a heaviness you can't explain. It's not exhaustion, at least not the kind sleep fixes. It's something quieter, more corrosive, like a fog sitting behind your eyes. Your limbs move, but they drag. Your thoughts spark, but they don't fire. You're not immobile. You're haunted, and the haunting is subtle, because society has given you a script. Follow the steps. Achieve success. Be happy. But deep down, you know something's off. Something doesn't fit. And so each day you perform. You smile at the right time. You nod in meetings. You stay positive. But inside, a slow erosion begins. This is the hidden cost of being consequences. You don't break all at once. You fracture silently. The first crack appears when you start lowering your standards. Not because you can't reach them, but because you no longer know why they matter. Next, your passions dim. That fire you once felt toward art, learning, building, becoming starts flickering. You tell yourself it's temporary, a rough patch, but weeks become months, and the silence inside grows louder. And here's the worst part. You begin to believe it's you. You don't see the invisible architecture pressing down on you. You don't recognize the systems designed to keep you pacified, productive, and disconnected from your core. Instead, you internalize it. You wear your confusion like a character flaw. You blame your lack of motivation, your discipline problem. But what if the sickness isn't yours? What if it's cultural? The late philosopher Byung-Chul Han argued that we've entered an era of achievement society, where the pressure to self-optimize has replaced external oppression. You are no longer ruled by kings or priests, but by internalized expectations. Hustle, grind, be better, do more, smile while you drown. And it works, because the most effective prison is the one you can't see. No bars, no warden, just an endless mirror of your own inadequacy. You begin comparing yourself endlessly. The scroll never ends. Someone is always doing more, traveling farther, earning faster, living louder. And with each flick of the thumb, your own life feels smaller, less vivid, less urgent. This isn't entertainment anymore. It's erosion. Your attention is hijacked. Your time is carved up into 1,000 notifications. You exist in fragments. And in these fragments, you forget how to feel whole. Neurologically, the brain adapts to this chaos. It rewires. The dopamine pathways grow addicted not to accomplishment, but to anticipation, to novelty, to shallow wins. Your mind becomes overstimulated but undernourished, buzzing with input, starved of meaning. And what happens to a soul that can't find stillness? It collapses inward. What looks like laziness is often mental paralysis. Not a lack of effort, but a collapse of direction. Not a failure to work, but a failure to want. You may be capable of greatness, but if you can't feel why it matters, what engine do you run on? This is the quiet epidemic no one posts about. Affects your relationships. You become distant, emotionally unavailable, not by choice, but by dissociation. When you're lost, you don't know how to be found by others. Intimacy demands presence, and presence requires inner alignment. Without it, conversations become hollow. Connections feel like effort. Love becomes performance. It affects your creativity. Ideas once born from the soul now feel mechanical. You second guess. You over-edit. You delay not from sloth, but from fear. Because when you've forgotten who you are, every act of creation becomes a question you're afraid to answer. It affects your identity. You morph to match environments. At work, you're one thing. At home, another. Online, something else entirely. The authentic self. She's buried beneath layers of adaptation. You don't fake it because you're deceptive. You fake it because you're unsure what's real anymore. And perhaps most tragically, it affects your ability to hope. You stop setting long-term goals not because you don't care, but because you've lost faith that any destination will feel different from the numb road you're on now. Why reach for something if every previous milestone has left you emptier than before? This is not laziness. This is existential burnout. And you're not alone. Millions are moving through life with this quiet ache. They function, yes, but as ghosts. They eat, talk, perform, but without depth. They're not choosing sloth. They're enduring disorientation. And this disorientation has a name: meaninglessness. But here's the turning point. If you can feel this, if you recognize it, you're already waking up. Most don't. They adapt. They blend in. They medicate the symptoms without ever confronting the disease. But you're asking the right question. You're seeing the invisible. And now, the trap is exposed. You know you're not broken. You're misaligned. And something inside you, faint but fierce, is ready to revolt. So the question becomes, how do you break free from a system that taught you to betray yourself? Let's begin the rebellion. You don't need more discipline. You don't need another motivational quote or productivity hack or 5-step morning routine. Those are bandages, not cures. The real rebellion begins not with doing more, but with remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And it starts in silence, not the absence of sound kind, but the terrifying, sacred stillness where your thoughts have no script, and your soul can finally speak. That's where you meet yourself again. The you beneath the noise, the you before comparison, the you who once felt deeply, dreamed vividly, moved with purpose. But why is it so hard? Because modern life doesn't just distract you, it sedates you. Comfort, convenience, and constant stimulation form a cocoon that numbs pain, but also muffles truth. To awaken, you must be willing to feel again. Not just joy or inspiration, but disillusionment, grief, even rage. The pain isn't the enemy, it's the compass. And here's your paradoxical truth. Your so-called laziness is not a barrier. It's a signal, a protest, a red flag raised by your unconscious self. It's saying, I refuse to keep performing a version of life that I no longer believe in. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. But rebellion, real rebellion, requires risk. You'll have to confront ideas you've built your identity on, that your worth is in your output, that busyness equals value, that hustle is holy. You'll have to face the brutal possibility that much of what you've been chasing wasn't yours to begin with. What if you never really wanted the job that drains you? What if the degree you earned was applause for a role you never auditioned for? What if the life you're living is someone else's script, and you're just now waking up? Halfway through Act 2, it's not too late to rewrite it. You break free by getting radically honest, first with yourself, then with the world. Start small. What drains you? What nourishes you? What moments make you forget time exists? What people make you feel more real, not less? These aren't just lifestyle questions. They are spiritual diagnostics. They lead you back to your design. And then you subtract, not add. Subtract. Subtract the things that mute your inner voice. The scrolls, the noise, the performative conversations, the projects that impress everyone but hollow you out inside. You may lose approval. You may disappoint expectations. But in their place, you gain something rare. Integrity. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. That's terrifying and liberating. It means you are the sculptor, not the sculpture, the author, not the footnote, but no one else will write it for you. So begin, but not with grand plans or perfect blueprints. Begin with alignment. Begin with something ancient and unsellable. Your why, not the corporate buzzwordy kind, but the real why. The ache, the vision, the thing you would die for or at least suffer to become. And here's what you'll find. Once aligned, effort flows. Energy returns. What once felt like laziness begins to look more like waiting for the right direction, not just any direction. This is not magical thinking. It's neurological. The brain responds differently when action is rooted in purpose. Dopamine doesn't just fire from achievement, it fires from meaningful progress. You were never wired to work aimlessly. You were wired to pursue what matters. Still, there will be resistance. Old habits will whisper. Fear will seduce. Convenience will tempt. You'll want to relapse into the numb comfort of familiarity. But remember, each time you say no to the false, you say yes to the real. You don't break free in a single act of courage. You break free in 1,000 tiny choices, choosing silence over distraction, choosing depth over dopamine, choosing purpose over performance. And slowly you rise. Your days stop feeling like chains and start feeling like canvases. Your actions stop feeling forced and start feeling inevitable. The world may not change, but your experience of the world does. And that's everything, because here's the final rebellion. To live a life that feels like yours. To no longer outsource your identity. To
Section
no longer
3.
apologize for your consequences, your passions, your path. You're not here to impress. You're here to express. And when you finally live from that center unapologetically, unsanitized, you become dangerous to everything that profits from your confusion. You stop being a product. You start being a presence. And presence, that's the most powerful form of protest. But there's one last threshold to cross. One final truth to confront. Because once you've reclaimed your direction, there's a deeper question. What is the point of all this? Let's go there. There's a moment after the rebellion, after the shedding, after the silence when you sit face to face with the rawness of being. And for the first time in perhaps forever, there's no one left to perform for. No more borrowed dreams. No more masks. Just you staring at the mirror of your own soul, asking the question no one taught you how to answer. Why am I here? Not what do I do, not how do I succeed, but why do I exist? It's a haunting question, and a holy one, because the truth, the real pain you've been calling laziness, was never about effort. It was about absence. The absence of meaning, of rootedness, of soul. You were tired because you did too little. You were exhausted because you did too much of what didn't matter, and far too little of what does. You've been told your worth is in your productivity, but that's a lie crafted by systems that profit from your self-doubt. You were not born to be a cog in a machine or a number in a metric. You were born to remember something sacred, that you are not here to fit in. You are here to wake up, and to wake up is to see what most people never dare confront, that the world is built to distract you from the very thing your heart aches for: presence, connection, purpose. What if I told you that your deepest fear, the fear of being lost, is actually your greatest invitation? Because to be lost in the modern sense often means you are no longer traveling roads paved by other people's expectations. You're in uncharted territory, and that's exactly where your truth begins. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also warned this becoming is not comfortable. It is not efficient. It is not linear. It is a death and a rebirth. The death of illusions. The death of identities that no longer serve you. The death of chasing meaning outside yourself. And the rebirth of a soul that finally remembers what it's made of. You don't need a new routine. You need a resurrection. A coming alive. Not in the eyes of the algorithm or the applause of your peers, but in the quiet pulse of authenticity. That's the ultimate truth. The final, powerful realization. You are not lazy. You were never lazy. You were disconnected from your why. You were drowning in noise. You were following a map that didn't lead to your home. But now you know. You know that energy follows clarity. That action follows alignment. That once you touch purpose, movement is no longer forced. It's natural. It flows. And you know something else, something terrifying and liberating all at once. There is no one coming to save you. No perfect job, partner, guru, or breakthrough. There is only the you that you're becoming, through every yes to your soul and every no to the lie. But here's the beauty. You don't need to be fully healed to begin. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to return to the center, to your essence, to the truth that was buried, not broken. Let go of the shame. Let go of the labels. Let go of the script. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not failing. You are awakening. And when you awaken, the world begins to change. Not because it becomes easier, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. You stop chasing life. You start embodying it. And the quiet miracle is this: what once looked like apathy becomes wisdom. What once looked like stagnation becomes stillness. What once looked like laziness becomes a sacred pause. A pause that made space for your soul to speak again. So breathe, not to calm down, but to remember. Remember who you are beneath the noise. You are not here to merely survive. You are here to live awake, to feel fully, to act intentionally, to create meaning, not consume it. Because the ultimate rebellion in a distracted world is not attention, it is presence. And the ultimate freedom in a performance-obsessed culture is not success, it is alignment. You don't need to find your purpose. You need to return to it. It's been whispering all along beneath the shame, beneath the fear, beneath the labels. And now you hear it. Now you remember. So go, not to prove, but to express. Not to earn worth, but to embody it. The world doesn't need another achiever. It needs a soul fully alive. And that is what you are becoming.